In my first life, I found the amnesiac heiress of the New York elite and took care of her for 3 years. When she got her memory back, she saw me as a stain on her reputation. She had her men stuff me in a burlap sack and dump me in the East River. In this life, I found her again, and I swore a single hateful vow to absolutely ruin her. 3 years later, when a Manhattan princess recovered her memories and faced the fact that she was now a married mother of 5, she was completely and utterly speechless. The icy water of the river flooded my sinuses, the feeling of suffocation growing more intense by the second. All I could hear was the slap of the waves against the pier, and in the distance, the roar of a motorboat as the men in black sped away. They tied a cinder block to the sack before throwing me in. Their last words echoed in my head. The lady said leaving your body intact was a courtesy. The cold, emotionless voice replayed in my mind. Victoria Vanderholt, you are one heartless bitch. I tried to laugh, but only a gurgling sound escaped my throat. 3 years ago, I found an amnesiac Victoria next to a dumpster. For 3 years, I doted on her, giving her the best of everything I could afford. She was a blank slate, completely dependent on me. She'd wait for me to get home from work with a glass of water and sit with me quietly when I worked late into the night. We fell in love. I treated her like a queen, buying her the best of everything I could manage. I was even saving up for a ring. But 2 weeks ago, she got her memory back. The moment she did, she started looking at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. She told me she was a Vanderholt, one of the wealthiest families in New York. She said our 3 years together were nothing more than a stain she'd acquired while she wasn't herself. She offered me a check to end it. I thought that was it. I never imagined. She wanted me erased completely. No good deed goes unpunished, I guess. I thought, as my consciousness faded, maybe it was for the best. At least I wouldn't have to see her phony face ever again. But just as everything went dark, the suffocating pressure vanished. I snapped my eyes open, squinting against a harsh white light. The smell wasn't the sludge of the river. My lungs filled with clean, easy air. What the hell? Didn't I just get dumped in the river? I felt my clothes. I was in a dry pair of pajamas. My head creaked as I turned to look at the phone on my nightstand. The screen was lit up, the time and date glowing clearly. September 15th, 2022, 7:15 p.m. That was 3 years ago. 3 years. Did I get a do-over? Am I back? I shot up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. It wasn't a dream. The date on my phone, the headlines on Google News, even the score from last night's Knicks game. It was all exactly as it was 3 years ago. I was back, reborn 3 years in the past. The initial wave of euphoria was immediately replaced by a bone-deep hatred. I was going to get my revenge. Victoria Vanderholt, you owe me, and in this life, I'm going to make you pay it back 1,000 times over. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the window. The streetlights below cast a yellow glow on the sidewalk. By the community dumpsters at the entrance to my apartment complex in Queens, a young woman was crouched, her back a thin, lonely silhouette. Her dress was stained with grime, her hair a tangled mess. It was Victoria. Last time, my stupid, bleeding heart made me take her home, starting a 3-year charade that ended with me in a sack at the bottom of a river. This time, I was going to use her 3 years of amnesia to absolutely destroy her. Just then, my eyes caught a flyer taped to a lamppost. A hiring notice for an electronics assembly plant in Jersey. I'd heard those places were brutal. 12-hour shifts on your feet. Work so mind-numbing you could fall asleep standing up. Making a Manhattan princess assemble circuit boards. Heh. A cold smirk spread across my face. I grabbed my jacket. As I opened the door, a gust of cool night air washed over me, but I was burning up inside. Every step I took toward her felt like a drumbeat of vengeance. You look cold. Come with me. I walked right up to her and spoke, my voice flat. Right now, she had no memory, no identity. She was starving, and her thin dress offered no protection from the autumn chill. I knew that to her. In this moment, I must have looked like a savior. The wind picked up, and she shivered, pulling her arms around herself. She looked up, revealing a face that was dirty but undeniably exquisite. Her eyelashes were caked with dust, her eyes wide with a lost, terrified confusion. Who are you? Victoria's voice was a fragile, trembling whisper. I didn't answer her question, just repeated what I'd said. You look cold. Come with me. With that, I turned and started walking away. I heard the soft, hesitant patter of footsteps behind me. She was following. I glanced over my shoulder. She looked like a stray kitten, cautiously accepting a lifeline. I unlocked the door to my apartment and pointed to the bathroom. Go get cleaned up. She hesitated for a second, then shuffled in that direction. Victoria looked like a wreck, the filth masking her stunning features. If she'd been clean, someone else would have scooped her up hours ago. I turned on a shower for her, setting the temperature, and tossed her a clean towel. There's plenty of hot water. Make sure you get all that grime off. I closed the door and went to the kitchen. I pulled a carton of eggs, some spinach, and a pack of instant ramen from the fridge. I cooked 2 simple bowls, topped them with a fried egg, and didn't even bother with green onions. In my first life, I'd cook her feast, and in return, she called me a stain. This time, she could eat ramen. The sound of the shower stopped. Victoria emerged, her hair dripping wet, wearing an old t-shirt of mine that hung off her frame. Her eyes were shy and uncertain. Sit down. Eat. I motioned to the chair across from me. She immediately scurried over. The smell of the food made her swallow hard. She picked up the fork and started inhaling the noodles, wincing as she burned her tongue, but never stopping. She was clearly starving. I ate slowly, methodically, watching the face I had once loved to the point of obsession, the same face that had sent me to my death. Hatred grew inside me, like a thorny vine. When she finished, she looked at me, twisting her hands in her lap. Thank you. I wiped my mouth and leaned back in my chair. Do you want to stay? Because I don't run a charity here. Her face went pale. She clutched the hem of my shirt. I could do chores. I'll do anything. Chores? I laughed. A short, humorless sound. I stood up and walked over to her, looking down at her from my full height. Here's the deal. You'll be my woman. You'll sleep with me tonight. Her head shot up, her eyes wide with shock. What? What did you say? You heard me. I leaned in close, my voice low and menacing. Either you stay and be my woman, or you get out right now. She glanced at the door, then back at me. The fight in her eyes flickered and died, crushed by the weight of her reality. Okay, I'll do it. Her voice was choked with unshed tears. I grabbed her by the wrist and pulled her toward the bedroom. She stumbled, and a single tear escaped, splashing silently on the floor. Last time, I treated her like a priceless treasure, as if she were made of glass. But this time, the bedroom door clicked shut, the deadbolt sliding home with a final thunk. She looked like a lamb to the slaughter, but there wasn't a trace of warmth in my eyes. I knew her type. Victoria had never been with a man before. Tonight, she was going to learn what it felt like. For the first half of the night, the sounds of her crying never stopped, stifled, heartbroken sobs. She must have been in a lot of pain, her body trembling like a leaf, but she didn't even have the courage to cry out loud. I leaned against the headboard, watching her curled into a ball, her pale skin flushed an angry red. Got to admit, the trust fund princess was built. Even looking this pathetic, she was still alluring. Victoria Vanderholt, you think you're so high and mighty, don't you? I wonder what you'll think when you get your memory back and remember the humiliation of tonight. I couldn't wait to find out. I hated Victoria, but I wasn't a complete monster. The next day, she was so exhausted she couldn't get out of bed. You just rest up today, honey, I told her, kissing her forehead. I let her lay in bed all day. She just pouted, staring at me with those big, watery eyes as I left for work. That night, I came home, and we did it all over again. For the next week, she spent her nights trying to keep up with me, and with every passing day, she grew more attached, more dependent. After a week, she had her energy back. Her spirit seemed to have recovered. She even started initiating things herself. That's when I launched phase 2 of my revenge. Babe, things are really bad at my company, I told her one night, putting on my most dejected face. They haven't paid me in 3 months. Well, almost out of money. I think you're going to have to get a job, too. In reality, I was the top designer at my firm, a linchpin they couldn't afford to lose. I was making 6 figures and had over $300,000 in savings. I wasn't hurting for cash at all. I'd also started funneling my savings into crypto, remembering that in 3 years, certain coins are going to explode by thousands, even tens of thousands of %. In 3 years, I have more money than I could ever spend. But for now, I was playing the part of the struggling boyfriend, Also, I could degrade the amnesiac heiress sleeping in my bed. I was going to send her to a factory to learn what real, soul-crushing assembly line work felt like. Okay, I'll get a job. She agreed without a moment's hesitation. Then, a flicker of fear crossed her face. But I don't think I know how to do anything. Don't worry. Isul here. I already found a place for you. It's a factory nearby, not far from our apartment. It was a small workshop that produced electronic components. The work wasn't physically strenuous, but the hours were brutal. 2 rotating shifts, at least 12 hours a day. Well, will you come with me the first time? She asked, her voice small. I knew she was scared of new places, afraid to go alone. The next day, I took her to the electronics plant. The place was filled with blue-collar workers, hunched over a long, moving assembly line. Once the belt started moving, you didn't even have time for a sip of water. The job was simple, mounting tiny screws on his circuit boards. Perfect. I was thrilled. Victoria took her place at the assembly line and quickly got the hang of the repetitive motion. Work hard, sweetheart. I'll come pick you up this afternoon, I said. I had my own job to get to. After making sure she was settled, I turned to leave. I will. I'll make good money for us, she said, giving me a little fist pump, her face a mask of determined optimism. That afternoon, no, that evening, when Victoria finally clocked out, it was already 7:00 p.m. She was dragging her feet, her body screaming with exhaustion. But the second she walked out of the factory gate and saw me waiting, her eyes lit up. Honey, you came to get me. She rushed over, her face beaming. I pecked her on the forehead. Was it tough in there? She paused for a beat before answering. It's a little tiring, but as long as I get to see you when I'm done, it doesn't feel tiring at all. I laughed to myself. She was so drunk on this illusion of love that her common sense had completely checked out, which was just fine by me. How else was I going to torture her? I took her to get burgers and fried chicken. All those empty calories would help her bulk up fast, giving her the stamina she needed for the long hours at the factory. See, I was being so good to her, right? Of course, I had another motive for feeding her junk food. The real Victoria was obsessively vain about her appearance. When she woke up in 3 years and saw her new, stronger body, she would absolutely lose her mind. I couldn't stop the grin from spreading across my face as I imagined her staring at her reflection in disgust. When we got home, we went through our usual nightly routine. She was dead tired after a full day of work, but she still forced herself to keep up with me, finally collapsing into a heap on the bed, too exhausted to move a muscle. Hith. Tired, good. That's the point. And so it began. The once great Manhattan heiress started her new life, screwing tiny components onto circuit boards, day in and day out. After a shift, I'd pick her up and take her for greasy, high-calorie meals. At night, I'd pull her into bed for more exercise. Days bled into weeks. Buoyed by my love and support, she managed to survive 2 weeks at the factory. But one day, she came out looking pale and upset. Honey, could you help me find a different job? It seemed her career as a screw-turner was losing its appeal. I gently stroked her hair. What's wrong? She hesitated, then mumbled, the line supervisor. He tried to touch me. I told him to stop, and now he's always giving me a hard time. A surge of anger shot through me. That bastard. He was going to ruin my plan. Just stick it out for a couple more days. I'll figure something out. Okay. I calmed her down and told her to hang in there. For the next 3 days, I spent all my free time staking out that supervisor. It didn't take long to discover he was juggling affairs with 3 or 4 different women from the factory. I watched as one of them slipped into his car after work. The car started shaking. I just smirked and hit record on my phone. That night, I sent the video to the woman's husband. The next day, the husband and a few of his buddies showed up at the factory and beat the supervisor to a pulp. When the factory owner found out why, he fired the supervisor on the spot. When I picked Victoria up from work, she was beaming, clinging to my arm. Ethan, you won't believe it. The supervisor who kept trying to hit on me got fired. And somebody beat him up today. Apparently, he was cheating on his wife. Seeing her so relieved, I just smiled, a silent, anonymous hero. 4. The Children of Vengeance. A few weeks later, Victoria fainted on the assembly line and was rushed to a nearby clinic. I hurried over, and the doctor told me she was pregnant, over a month along, with twins. In our first life, I'd been careful with her, always using protection. She'd never gotten pregnant. This time, I hadn't bothered. Doing the math, I realized the babies must have been conceived that very first night. I thought about it for a long time before making a decision. She was going to have them. When the great Miss Van der Holt finally got her memory back and discovered she had kids with me, twins, no less, the look on her face, just imagining it was thrilling. Sarah, Victoria was resting in the clinic bed. I called her name softly. Sarah Miller. That's the name I gave her this time around. I'd even pulled some strings to get her a new social security number and ID. It's twins, I said, looking into her eyes with all the fake adoration I could muster. I want to keep them. They're a symbol of our love. If you want them, then we'll keep them, she replied, almost without hesitation. Perfect. But just because she was pregnant didn't mean she could stop working. I arranged for her to be transferred to a less demanding position at the factory, one she could do sitting down. Payday came. As I'd requested, the factory paid Victoria in cash. For her first month, she brought home $7,000. Back at our apartment, she pulled the envelope out of her purse, took out a thick stack of crisp $100 bills, and presented it to me like a trophy. Honey, this is my first paycheck. It's for you. Looking at her hands, which were already starting to form calluses, I felt a flicker of something I couldn't afford to feel. Pity. I quickly crushed it. I took a 50 from the stack and pushed it back in her hand. You keep this. Buy yourself some nice face cream. Thank you, honey. She clutched the $50 bill as if I'd just handed her a winning lottery ticket, her face breaking into a radiant smile. Later, she came home from the drugstore with a $10 jar of lotion and stood in front of the mirror, happily dabbing it on her face. Watching her, I almost burst out laughing. Victoria, oh Victoria, I bet you've never used a $10 skincare product in your entire life. Have you? Last time, you said I was your stain. This time, I'm going to make sure that stain is permanent. My goal was to ruin her so completely that by the time she remembered who she was, her past 3 years would be a source of unending shame. To make the births legitimate, we went to the courthouse and got a marriage license. We even had a small wedding reception. Of course, everything was done on the cheap. On our wedding day, Victoria was already starting to show. She stood there in a shabby, rented wedding dress, looking at me with eyes full of pure, unadulterated love. It was so ridiculous I almost laughed out loud. Ethan, I'm so happy to spend the rest of my life with you. Through thick and thin, till death do us part. Her eyes were practically sparkling. Yeah, I nodded, pulling her into a hug. Thick and thin, till death do us part. But in my head I was sneering, this poisonous woman? Share a real life with me. As if, by her 7th month, Victoria was too big to work anymore, so she stayed home to focus on the pregnancy. She developed a habit of gently stroking her round belly, humming and murmuring sweet nothings. Daniel, Sophie, you two grow big and strong in there. Just 3 more months, and you'll get to meet your mommy and daddy. For a fleeting second, I felt a pang of doubt. Was what I was doing really right? But then I remembered the suffocating darkness of the river, the feeling of my lungs burning for air, and my resolve hardened like steel. I was going to tarnish her. I was going to make her so unrecognizable that she would despise the person she had become. By the 10th month, her stomach was enormous, like she'd strapped a giant watermelon to her front. Sometimes you could see the babies kicking and stretching inside. Ethan, look, they're kicking me, Victoria would call out, her face glowing with that same sickly sweet smile. But I knew the truth. This sweet little domestic scene was nothing but a fragile illusion. Soon after, our children were born, a boy and a girl. Both were healthy and chubby-cheeked, unbearably cute. I named the boy Daniel, hoping he would grow up to be a good, honorable man. The girl we named Sophie, for wisdom. Daniel, Sophie, be good now. Looking at the 2 tiny, squirming bundles in the bassinet, it wasn't just Victoria. Even I almost got lost in the warmth of the moment. But reality came crashing back down like a bucket of ice water. This was the same woman who, to protect her own pristine image, might not hesitate to get rid of her own children if she saw them as part of the stain. For their sake, and for my own, I had to be smarter. I had to make sure my plan was foolproof. Time flew by. Another 7 or 8 months passed. My mom came up from her home in Florida, to help with the babies. Victoria had weaned the twins, and with her hands suddenly free, she started talking about going back to work at the factory. Honey, now that your mom is here to help, I want to go back to work. If we both save up, we could buy a house sooner. She had completely bought into our shared life of poverty. Buying a house had become her obsession. I desperately wanted to tell her that she, the real her, probably owned at least 100 properties, if not more. But of course, that was Victoria Vanderholt, not Sarah Miller. The truth was, I'd already bought a spacious condo with my crypto earnings, but I didn't want to move yet. A stain belongs in a cheap rental apartment in Queens. For the last half year, I hadn't been pushing her as hard. Frankly, just nursing 2 babies was enough to keep her exhausted. Okay, if you want to go, then go. If she wanted to go back to assembling electronics, who was I to stop her? What I didn't expect was for her to actually be good at it. Less than 2 weeks after she went back, Victoria got promoted to line supervisor. Honey, I'm a supervisor now. I got a raise to $10,000 a month. Seeing her so proud and happy, I felt a surge of annoyance. I sent her there to suffer, not to climb the corporate ladder. How did she manage to become a manager? I couldn't exactly forbid her from taking the promotion, but there were other ways. I started keeping her up every night. It didn't take long. Within a couple of weeks, she was pregnant again. Snap, triplets. We both stared at the ultrasound scan, dumbfounded. I never would have guessed that together we were this prolific. First twins, now triplets. That made a grand total of 5 kids. And then I thought, 5 kids. That's perfect. When Victoria finally gets her memory back and realizes she's given me 5 children, that the stain is so deep it can never be washed away, isn't she just going to die from rage? Haha. I could barely contain my glee. Honey, I really want to work hard and save for a house, Victoria said to me, her voice soft and hesitant. The unspoken message was clear. She didn't want these 3 babies. Not a chance. More kids means more blessings, I told her smoothly. And don't worry about the house. I actually already bought one. I was going to surprise you. Her eyebrows shot up, a flicker of joy on her face that was quickly replaced by worry. But with our income, can we really afford to raise 5 children? She was still worried about money. Relax, I reassured her. I'm doing really well at work. I got a big raise, and I get to share the profits now. I should clear over $1 million this year. Oh, and remember that crypto I bought a while back? It's up nearly 100 times. It's worth almost $10 million now, and it's probably going to keep climbing. From now on, we're not going to have to worry about money. You just focus on having the babies. I wasn't even telling her the full extent of my wealth. My crypto portfolio was actually worth over $100 million. In a couple of years, it would likely be worth billions. One thing I said was true, though. We would never have to worry about money again. And really, compared to any other form of torment, making Victoria Vanderholt the mother of my 5 children was the most perfect punishment I could have ever devised. I couldn't wait to see her face when she woke up and found herself tied to 5 little burdens. But, we already have 2 babies. Adding 3 more. It just feels like too much. Even with amnesia, her mind was still sharp. Faced with my demand that she have the triplets, she was clearly hesitant. In this day and age, most people thought twice about having a second kid, let alone adding 3 more when you already had 2. I thought for a moment, then pulled out a debit card. I loaded it with $500,000. I slapped the card down on the table in front of her. There's $500,000 on this card. If you agree to have the babies, I'll give you the PIN. $500,000. In her current state of mind, that was an unimaginable fortune. Her entire body froze. A split second later, her hand shot out and snatched the card off the table, clutching it in a death grip. The PIN. Tell me the PIN. Clearly, for $500,000, she was willing to have the triplets. She had no idea that in her former life, a single piece of her jewelry was worth more than that. And now, here she was, the amnesiac heiress, willing to sell her body for 3 more children for some that was, to her real self, pocket change. I told her the PIN, and her face lit up with pure joy. And me, I was so happy I could barely keep from laughing. This was a win-win. We'd been through a twin pregnancy before, so triplets weren't that much harder. In fact, Victoria, with her triplet-sized belly, managed to keep working at the factory for another 4 or 5 months. It got to the point where the factory owner called me, practically begging me to make her stay home. He was terrified she'd go into labor on the assembly line and he'd be liable. I couldn't be careless either. Those are my 3 kids in there. By the 5th month, I put my foot down. No more factory work. That's it. You're staying home and resting. No more work. Before, I was tormenting her for revenge. Now, I was protecting my investment, my 3 children. Okay, I won't go. Happy. Victoria reluctantly agreed to stay home. In the blink of an eye, it was the 10th month, the day she went into labor. The doctors recommended a C-section, saying it was safer for triplets. I agreed. The 3 babies came out quickly, 2 boys and a girl, all screaming their heads off in the delivery room. When one cried, the other 2 would join in, creating a deafening, chaotic chorus. And it was on that day that the proud, arrogant Victoria Vanderholt, the one who saw me as a stain, decided to make her return. Wait, my name isn't Sarah. I'm Victoria Vanderholt. After a wave of intense dizziness, she remembered everything. When she looked up at me again, her expression was complicated. I knew in an instant. She was back. What I didn't expect was that she hadn't just remembered her old life. She'd remembered her past life, too. She stared at me for a long moment, then her brow furrowed. You were certainly busy this time around, weren't you? She said, her voice dripping with ice. Not only did you send me to work in a factory, but you made me have 5 children for you. What do you think I am, some kind of baby factory? The moment I heard that, I knew. She remembered the first life, too. She was reborn, just like me. Perfect. Now we could finally settle the score. Victoria Vanderholt, I never thought someone like you would get a second chance. Just moments ago, we were a loving couple. Now we were enemies, staring each other down. Someone like me. Victoria muttered the words, looking down at her own fleshy, swollen hands, then seeming to register her puffy, overweight body for the first time. Her face grew darker with every passing second. What do you know? And look what you've done to me. You've ruined me. I look like a monster. Her face was twitching, on the verge of a complete breakdown. Ha. I was laughing on the inside, and I didn't bother to hide the triumphant smirk on my face. This was what I'd been waiting for. I decided to twist the knife. Now, Victoria, don't get so worked up. You're the mother of my 5 children, after all. Besides, you just had a C-section. You don't want to pop your stitches. The mention of her 5 children seemed to snap her back into focus. She glared at me, her eyes filled with murderous intent. You got a lot of nerve. Just you wait. I will make you pay for this. Just wait. She was the same as last time. The second things didn't go her way, she turned vicious. But this time, I was ready for her. Good. I'll be waiting. I spat back. We locked eyes, both of us practically breathing fire. Just then, one of the triplets, who had briefly fallen quiet, started wailing again. Wah! Wah! Like a chain reaction, the other 2 joined in. The combined screaming of 3 infants was enough to give us both a splitting headache. Well, what are you waiting for? Feed them. I snapped, scooping up one of the babies and thrusting him toward her. She shot me a look that could kill, but she dutifully, if angrily, lifted her hospital gown and let the baby nurse. The great Victoria Vanderholt, once so untouchable. Now, she was puffy, exhausted, and forced to breastfeed my children. I felt a wave of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. She hadn't called her wealthy parents yet, but when we were discharged from the hospital, a swarm of reporters was waiting for us at the exit. Miss Vanderholt, as a Manhattan heiress, is it true you've been missing for 3 years and have had 5 children with this man? Miss Vanderholt, you've just given birth, correct? We hear you had twins first and then triplets? The reporters shoved their cameras and microphones in her face, bombarding her with questions. I'd called them, of course. I wanted this story to be public. I wanted the whole world to know about me and our 5 children. That way, she wouldn't dare try to get rid of us quietly. In fact, she'd be forced to accept our existence. She might even have to take us back to the Vanderholt mansion with her. Victoria seemed to realize the reporters were my doing. She didn't answer any of their questions, just turned and gave me another look that was pure daggers. One of the reporters noticed me. Sir, you must be Miss Vanderholt's husband. Can you tell us how you 2 met? Sir, you're quite the man, getting an heiress like her to have 5 of your children. Ha. I could barely suppress my grin. That evening, Victoria's parents showed up at our apartment. "Oh, Victoria, my darling. We've been looking for you for 3 years. We were so worried." Victoria's mother rushed in, fussing over her daughter. But when she saw Daniel and Sophie, who were now toddlers, and then the 3 newborns in their bassinets, her eyes widened. "Wait a minute. Are all of these children yours, Victoria?" Victoria looked like she was on the verge of a total collapse, but she could only nod. "Yes, Mom. They're all your grandchildren." My own mom, who was standing nearby, bristled. "Excuse me, but they call me Grandma. They're your grandchildren." Victoria glanced at my mom, but didn't argue. I knew what she was thinking. She was already planning a custody battle. Fine by me. My wife was Sarah Miller, not Victoria Vanderholt. If she tried to use her real identity to fight me for custody, I had ways of fighting back by going after the Vanderholt family fortune. I knew from my past life that Victoria held a massive number of shares in her family's corporation. The Vanderholt empire was worth hundreds of billions. If they want a custody fight, they'd better be prepared for a fight over their assets, too. Victoria seemed to realize this as well. A day later, she packed up our things and moved me and all 5 kids into the Vanderholt mansion. Unlike last time, however, I now had my own security detail. There was no way she was dumping me in the river this time. "The older 2 can keep your name," she announced as soon as we arrived. "But the triplets will take the Vanderholt name." It was a reasonable demand. I shrugged. Fine by me. After settling the issue of the names, she brought up something else. "And you'll be officially joining the Vanderholt family. We'll need to have a proper wedding." Thanks to her status as a top-tier socialite, the story of her having 5 children had already gone viral. There was no suppressing it. It seemed Victoria was resigned to her fate. She wanted me to marry into her family. My real goal was to get a piece of her fortune. With her money, combined with the billions I had stashed in offshore crypto accounts, I could launch a corporate takeover and crush the Vanderholt empire, ruining her completely. She'd kill me in our last life. Even if she was the mother of my children, I would never give up on my revenge. She had to know that. So why was she asking me to marry into her family? "Victoria, don't tell me you've forgotten how I died in our last life." I decided to call her bluff. But at my words, she just looked confused. "What? You died in the last life?" From the look on her face, she genuinely didn't know. Something wasn't right. I immediately realized my death in the last life might have been more complicated than I thought. "Don't play dumb, Victoria. It was your security team that threw me in the river. They told me you gave the order." I pressed, watching her face closely. Victoria's brow furrowed even deeper. "I did not." She denied it without a second of hesitation. I never ordered anyone to kill you." Later, after I got my memory back, I thought about our 3 years together, and I realized I couldn't forget you. I couldn't sleep without you there. I regretted it. I even went looking for you. But my assistant told me you'd moved overseas and never wanted to see me again. After that, I was having trouble sleeping, so I took a few too many sleeping pills. When I woke up, I was here. Our memories of the past didn't line up. We both realized at the same time that someone else had been pulling the strings, and that I might have hated the wrong person. Sure enough, after a bit of digging, we found the truth. It had been Victoria's father, conspiring with an illegitimate son he had on the side. He had paid off Victoria's assistant and her entire security detail to get rid of me. The incident where Victoria fell overboard and lost her memory, that was the illegitimate son's doing, too. The revelation that her husband had a secret son sent Victoria's mother into a rage. Luckily, she was the one who really ran the company, and most of the shares were already in Victoria's name. Working together, mother and daughter kicked Victoria's father out of the company and their lives, leaving him with nothing. "So, it seems you hated the wrong person," Victoria said. We were standing on the penthouse balcony, wine glasses in hand, looking out over the glittering lights of the city. She was right. I had spent 3 years consumed by a hatred that was completely misdirected. "But you're not entirely innocent," I replied quietly. If she hadn't treated me like a dirty secret after getting her memory back, if she hadn't pushed me away, none of this would have happened. "Well, you certainly got your revenge," she said, turning to me. "You sent me to work on an assembly line and made me have 5 of your children. Can you forgive me now?" She looked at me, her eyes shining in the moonlight. I realized the anger wasn't there anymore. I reached out, my arm wrapping around her waist as naturally as it had 1,000 times before. I leaned down and captured her lips with mine. Even though the Victoria standing before me was a little heavier, a little softer around the edges, my body still remembered hers. My lips still remembered the taste of her kiss, just as intoxicating as it was 3 years ago.